and welcome to this special Mercury going retrograde in the 29th degree of Aquarius on the 26th of February 2026 at 6:44 GMT time. So ultimately, as with every Mercury retrograde, they have their own theme, right? So the theme of this Mercury retrograde, the first one of 3 in 2026, is the red pill moment you can't unswallow. So this isn't your standard, back up your files retrograde, which is a given with all retrograde periods. This is in the Astrological degree, which is the 29th degree of any sign, right? So this is the last breath before transformation, before Aquarius goes into Pisces, right? The emergency exit, the moment where you either accept you've changed or try climbing back into the chrysalis that no longer fits. So yeah, we've all been there, we love our comfort zones, as you will hear me say a lot in my audios, but ultimately it's, we love them as humans and we cannot like change, especially the change that Pluto can bring, right? So the Sabian symbology, the 29th degree of Aquarius, the butterfly emerging, coming out from the chrysalis, right? It's cocoon sort of thing. And the thing about butterflies is once they're out right, they can't go back in. Their metamorphosis is irreversible, right? So maybe you've been dissolving, letting go, restructuring, changing, and becoming something and someone your past self wouldn't recognize. And Mercury, the planet of thought, communication, and how you make sense of reality, is going retrograde, right, at a critical degree, the 29th degree, asking, are you ready to use your new wings, or will you pretend you're still a caterpillar? And we've just had Saturn's conjunction to Neptune. If you haven't heard that audio, check it out. It's influencing us right up until the end of March, and a lot of the special aspects this year, or that I will be covering in depth, right? I'm moving away from the weekly scopes and going more into natal astrology and the transits, so are supporting us to change. Some of you have been working for years, maybe not fully going the whole way in your transformation, right? And this retrograde is showing you that you wanting to change isn't the problem, right? This retrograde is showing you the reckoning, the judgment, which is the Saturn conjunction to Neptune. I can't remember. If you listen to my solar and lunar eclipse audio as well, a lot of these aspects this are all about judgment, or being judged. Are we ready to change and transform, not just as an individual but as a collective? So going back to Mercury retrograde, right? Mercury entered its shadow period, which is the period it goes in before it goes retrograde, on the 11th of February in the 14th degree, 15th degree, the 16 minute of Aquarius, which rounds up to the 15th Sabian degree. It goes retrograde on the 26th of February at 6:44 GMT in the 20th minute of Aquarius, which ranges up to the 29th degree. Then it goes direct on the 20th of March, right, in the 14th 16th minute again, and it leaves the shadow period completely on the 9th of April in the 28th 29th minute 29th degree of Aquarius, right? So it's going to be affecting us and has been affecting us for nearly 2 months, but the station point when it goes retrograde from the 26th of February through early March is when everything hits us, because station points, whether it's station retrograde or direct, right, are crisis points where the planet barely moves, but it's spreading outwards, because its retrogrades are really, planets moving side to side rather than going completely backwards, and this brings the maximum intensity. So this first retrograde of 2026 wants us to review our friendships, our communities, our hopes for the future, our social media presence, our group, relationship dynamics, our dependencies on technology, drugs, or anything else we depend on, and most crucially, the gap between what you say you value, which is Aquarius ideals of maybe equality, innovation, newness, thinking outside of the box, not going with the trend, the mainstream, right? Collective liberation, freedom, and, how you actually behave when nobody's watching. So who you say you are and who you actually are, and, sometimes when you lean on friends, depend on friends, they're actually already depending on you, and everyone can get confused, in relationships, about roles and people pleasing and all of that. So the next few weeks will bring clarity to these things, so good feelings can return and everyone can land on mutual ground, right? So, as I said, this wants us to think about our friendships. Are they really friendships or just dependencies? Sometimes we hold on to childhood friends and stuff, but the relationships can be toxic, and whether it's intimate relationships and whatever. One of the reasons why confusion can happen is we can pay too much attention to our own goals whilst losing track of our support network, and a little reflection, can help your goals find a better focus and identify the genuine support you actually rely on, or, relationships that are draining you, or where you are draining others' resources as well. And by the time Mercury goes direct on the 20th of March, you will know who your real friends are if you focus your energy, because with any astrological placement, right, it's what we do with it, so this retrograde is supporting us to review our friendships, right, and community and our plans for the future. So, yeah, by the time Mercury goes direct, you will know who your real friends are, and you would have separated the wheat from the chaff, the good from the bad, right? The life-giving versus the life-draining friendships and habits in your life. So why does the 29th degree of Aquarius matter? Well, the 29th degree of any sign, as I said, is called the Aronetic degree, from the Greek Anorita, meaning destroyer. It's the last degree, the emergency measure, the fever pitch before the transition into the new sign. So think of it like this. If a sign is a room, the 29th degree is that moment right before you exit, when you remember you left something behind and have to decide, do I go back for it or do I just leave it? Mercury at the 29th degree of Aquarius means every Aquarian theme you've been working with reaches critical, mass tension. So objectivity, are you thinking for yourself, or are you thinking what the media tells you, social media, the mainstream media, friends, family? Are you thinking objectively, or are you just depending on your own opinions? Intellectual freedom, are you really intellectually free? Do you think for yourself, or do you think what you are told to think? And group belonging and thinking versus individual truth, technological progress. Are you working with technology? I know there's been a lot of buzz about AI and a lot of it taking our jobs and stuff, but have you researched it for yourself? Technology, can you use these tools to help you in a healthy way? Also, your humanitarian impulses, are you doing enough for your local community, your family, or for yourself? And the insights that you've gained or will gain during this period, the perspectives that have changed or stayed the same. This retrograde tests whether those changes stuck or whether you were just trying them on for size. So the butterfly has emerged. Your transformation is complete. But what remains is the vulnerable waiting period where your wings dry before you can actually fly, and trying to rush it or reverse it, go back to the past when the past has gone, it's time to move on, can kill what you've become or who you're trying to become, right? Okay, so now I'm just going to give you guys the astrological breakdown, right? So, as I said, Mercury retrogrades on the 26th of February at 6:44 GMT time, which is 1:44 AM on the 26th of February Eastern time, 12:44 a.m. also on 26th Central Time, 11:44 p.m. on the 25th Mountain Standard Time, 10:44 PST p.m. on the 25th also, Alaskan Time 9:44 p.m. and Hawaii Time 8:44 p.m. on February the 25th, and Indian Time it's 12:14 p.m. on the 26th of February. Okay, so Mercury goes direct on the 20th of March, as I said, at 9:27 GMT time. So while it's going retrograde this year, it's making a conjunction with Venus at 2:44 orb applying, and Venus is at the Sabian symbol hydrometer, and I'm going to tell you what all of these Sabian symbols and stuff means in depth as we continue, right? And this rules the right fibula in the human body. Then we've got Mercury sextile Juno, and this is at a 2:01 orb applying, and Juno's in Sagittarius, and this is the sculpture's vision is taking form, and it rules the glute muscles in our body. So Mercury is making a square to Hygeia at a 1.49 orb separated, and Hygeia is in the first degree of Gemini, which has the Sabian degree of a glass-bottomed boat drifting over the wonders of the sea. Mercury is also making a square to the midhaven at 3.37 orb applying, and the midhaven's in the 25th degree of Sabian, which has the symbology of an X-ray and rules the fallopian tubes and reproduction system, as most of Scorpio Sabian symbols rules that area of the body, right? And in terms of the transiting aspect patterns, Mercury is making a T-square between the South Node in Leo, which is opposite the Sun, Palace and Ascendant in Aquarius, and the Or square in Lilith in Scorpio. And the theme of this energy is ego performance versus collective service, shadow, rage, and our repressed anger, which is going to be activated during this Mercury retrograde, which wants us to review our friendships and our plans for our future, as I said earlier. The second T-square is 24% strength, and this is between the midhaven in Scorpio, which is opposite Mercury, Venus in Aquarius, that are both or squaring Hygeia in Gemini. So the theme of this T-square is career truths can come out versus our intellectual ideas, our beliefs versus our daily health integration, so how well we're looking after our mind and our day-to-day habits and our career, right? And then there's the Thor's hammer, 29% strength orb, right? And the South Node's in Leo, Lilith is in Scorpio, both making a quincunx to Chiron and Keris in Pisces. And this is crisis that forges, rebuild strength, bringing our attention to the way that we spiritually bypassed, and this gets exposed to us, right? And then we've also got two stelliums. The first 31% strength, while they're both 31% strength. The first is between the Sun, Palace and the North Node in Aquarius, and then we've got the Sun, the North Node and the Ascendant in Aquarius as well. So the Sabian symbol and the 29th degree of Aquarius, the butterfly emerging from the chrysalis, rules the left tibia in the human body, and as I said, it's about our vulnerability and becoming who we want to be, and the fear we can have about moving out of our comfort zone, and how we can change in public when a lot of the time people who know us want us to stay the same, and it reminds us of irreversible transformation change that we need to make. And the Nakshatra is in Parva Bahadapa, which Pada 3, which is the 20th degree of Aquarius to 3:20 minutes Pisces, right? And this Pada is ruled by Jupiter. So the symbology of this Parva Bhadrapapa Nakshatra, right, is the front legs of a funeral cart. So the symbology of a coffin and jewel-faced people. And the theme is spiritual purification through crisis and burning away our impurity is, right? And I'll talk a bit more about that. But first I'm going to talk about the aspects, right? It's breaking down every aspect and telling you exactly where the retrograde pressure builds and what it's asking you to review and change, right? So Mercury's conjunction to Venus is telling us to review our desires, how we seek pleasure, our relationships, our values, and what we find worthwhile spending our time on. So Venus in Aquarius wants connection without possession, intimacy without, merging into one, and love without performance, right? So Mercury retrograde here asks us, have you been communicating what you want in your relationships, or avoiding like most of us do, or intellectualizing your needs into abstractions nobody can take action on, just being vague about you wants us to get clear about what we want in our relationships, wanting us to reconsider our relationships. And it's not necessarily bringing breakups, right? But for some of you, yes, this could happen. But it's wanting us to renegotiate the terms of our relationship and what partnership means to everybody involved, right? So you may review recent conversations, texts, voice notes, whatever, verbal communication, seeing patterns you've missed, realizing you've been asking for one thing whilst needing the other, or your partner may bring that to your attention, or friend, family, whatever. Or you may notice the person you're with, or your friends, whatever, keep promising that they'll change, but their behaviour stays the same, and for the first time you're ready to believe their actions over their explanations, because a lot of the time we can get lost in words, but actions is where the reality lives, what somebody does and says day to day, right? So in terms of the hydrometer test, this conjunction with Venus brings, right, it wants us to test our relationship. So a hydrometer measures liquid density and purity. So in terms of our relationship, it's asking what's the purity level of what you are calling love. Is it love really, or just toxicity? What's the density, the substantial stuff? Is it substantial, or is it diluted, watered down? Is someone just saying I love you, but their actions are saying they hate you or they don't respect you? The hydrometer doesn't judge, it just measures objectively, right? And you need that same objectivity about your relationships and desires right now. Are you staying because it's genuinely good, or because leaving feels too hard? Are you pursuing someone because you resonate, you're on the same life path, or because the chase gives your ego something to do? The hydrometer reveals what's exactly there once you remove the story and the lies and the fantasy, right? Diluted doesn't mean bad though. Sometimes you need to know the actual concentration, the solidness, as in, oh, I like you on the surface, you look great, but do they like your attributes, your strengths, your weaknesses, your personality, really, so you have to get to this, what does a relationship mean to you? Some of you only want the surface in relationships, some of you want depth, right? So, review your relationship so you can decide if it's what you want, or if you've been pretending weak tea is espresso, and if you're single, this retrograde may bring back an ex, classic Mercury retrograde energy, right? But the test is, are they genuinely different, or are you, should you move forward with them, or are you just lonely, or they're just lonely? Convincing yourself, the chrysalis, going back into the old, that's what it represents, the symbology, right? Convincing yourself, that the relationship could work. And sometimes, relationships from the past can work, but only if there's change and boundaries and respect, right? But ultimately, the Sabian symbol is saying no, butterflies don't revert back into the chrysalis, their cocoon, so don't go back, but of course it's up to you. Okay, so the next aspect, as I said, is Mercury sextile to Juno, and again it's putting the focus to our commitments, our partnerships, what we're willing to give up our freedom for. And the sextile to Mercury shows the opportunity for real conversations about what we expect from our partnerships and all types of relationships as well, right? So Juno sextile to Mercury allows us to actively shape, mould what we want our partnerships to look like. And the Sabian symbol, the sculpture's vision taking form, confirms that we're building something, carving it and bringing it into reality. Mercury, retrograde is giving us a chance to revise our plan, to review the blueprint before we've gone too far down the path that doesn't fit us and our needs and the other person's needs, or if we've gone down that path already and it's the wrong one, to end it. As I said, some of you may choose to end relationships during this retrograde, right? So maybe you can talk to someone if you're having, a problem making up your mind, or if you're single, talk to yourself about what you're actually available for versus what you say you want, because often there can be a gap, and this set style makes this conversation easier, more supportive, constructive and workable, right? And the glute muscles are the largest and strongest in our human body, right? So they, power forward movement, and our partnerships will strengthen our ability to move through the world and not take away and diminish it, right? So if your relationships, requires making yourself smaller, that's not partnership, that's performance anxiety with shared rent, right? So, and I know sometimes it can be difficult because you have to think about moving out and can you pay the bills and stuff. It's not easy, but is it really a good enough reason to stay in relationships because of financial constraints? And again, I know it is hard and stuff, and I know there's a lot of grey areas in relationships, but it's something for you to think about. And Hygeia at the first degree of Gemini, is separating. So it's showing that we've just been through, whatever it is you're experiencing. And Hygeia in Gemini lets us see beneath the surface of our daily health patterns. The glass bottom bowl observes, what's underwater without getting wet because it's see-through, we can see. And the square reveals how our thoughts affect our body, how stress manifests physically, and how our nervous system holds unexpressed communication. So maybe you've had a health wake-up call recently, or insomnia for some of you, sleep issues, digestive issues, anxiety, forcing you to notice the mind-body connection. And Mercury retrograde, with this aspect is asking what daily practices actually support your well-being versus draining you, and how can you look after your wellness so you can perform better on the mind, body and soul level, right? What information are you consuming that makes you sick? Maybe you're taking in a lot of negative, and there's a lot of crap going on in the world, so it can be hard. And as this, the first degree of Gemini rules the trachea, our windpipe, which is the passage for our breath and voice. And when this is restricted with literally or metaphorically, everything can suffer, right? So it's asking, what aren't you saying that's choking you and holding you back? And I know sometimes it can be hard to say the things we need to say because it can be repercussions, violence. Sometimes we can be in coercive relationships and all of that. So I know that it's not easy again, but it's asking us to, think about what we're not saying and what our body is trying to communicate, that our mind keeps intellectualizing away, and just being like, oh no, well, my body feels like this, but it's not because of this really, it's because of that, and just pushing it away. It's reminding us to listen to our body. Gemini in Hygeia wants variety, information, mental stimulation in healthy ways, right? And the square to Mercury in Aquarius shows you're overthinking it, reading every study, trying to, do every biohack, optimizing yourself into exhaustion. Sometimes the healthiest thing is simplicity. Sleep, water, moving your body, speaking your truth, touching the grass, and letting go of the things that are not for you so newness can come, because sometimes the new can't come if we keep on holding on to the old. So Mercury square to the midheaven, the Sabian symbology of an X-ray is, sort of like putting the focus on our career and our role in public, right? So an X-ray sees through the pretense and the facades and exposes what's hidden. We have to go and have an MRI or X-ray at the hospital, right? And it provides diagnostic precision. So, our outer appearance, our skin doesn't show, but when you put X-ray, it can show what's going on within our body. So, our public image and career carry this quality. We can see through the bullshit during this retrograde, diagnosing system problems, revealing hidden power dynamics. Mercury in retrograde says, what about bigger systematic issues, while the midheaven says we need to deal with this specific power dynamic right now. So it's calling out the bullcrap, especially in the workplace, especially in our social relationships, right? And this can create tension between our intellectual ideals, which is represented by Mercury, innovation, equality, collective freedom, we may have these ideals, right? And the professional and actual worldly reality, such as power dynamics, emotional intensity, and behind the scenes navigation. Because as I said, we may all want world peace, but we may all want it in different ways, and we've got different cultures and gender identity, sexual orientations, beliefs, and all of that to navigate, right? So you may work somewhere requiring that Scorpio intensity that exhausts you and burns you outright. Mercury wants us to think forwardly in a way that breaks the old system and beliefs, right? And in some cases, your public image can be more intense than your actual personality, and the gap can widen. So it just depends on what this means for you, Do you have to be intense at work but you're a chilled out person? Do you want to think forward but you work in a conservative environment or have conservative family and friends? This retrograde wants us to review, does this career path serve your overall growth and evolution? Is your public reputation aligned with your private values? And sometimes we can't do that. It can't be, because who we are in public, we may have to be more professional at work and stuff. So ultimately, it's about asking yourself what power dynamics at work need confronting and what you can confront, who supports your professional goals versus who just benefits from your hard work, right? And the coax is a remnant in the human body from when we had tails on the scientific front, and the fallopian tubes are the passage for creation, and both of these are what outdated professional structures, routines are you carrying on, what wants to be birthed, that you're blocking with old patterns. And by the time Mercury stations direct, if you do the work of reflecting, you will know whether your career path serves you or whether you've been climbing a ladder that has been leaning against the wrong building, going the wrong way. So now I'm going to talk about the pressure cooker, right? The transiting aspect patterns, the T-square, the Thor's hammer, and the Stellium. Okay, so the T-squares remind us of the key theme of this Mercury retrograde, which is transformation through life's obstacles, right, through the difficulties, and growth through friction and tension. So the T-square, the first one, right, is drawing our attention to performance versus being authentic, right? So we've got the South Node in Leo opposite the Sun, Palace and Ascendant in Aquarius, squaring Lilith and Scorpio. So your South Node, which is our karmic comfort zone, past life skills that become crutches sits in Leo, the performer who needs to be seen, special, adored, and be the exceptional one. And the Aquarius planets, right, pull towards the North Node, collective service, intellectual contribution, and being one voice in a chorus, one of many, right? So it's bringing, the Aquarius planets is bringing less look at me energy with more look at us energy, right? Less personal glory, more systematic change. So Leo in Scorpio squares both, activating our shadow material, the things that we're polite about and we hide and we kind of like just go around the reeking, meaning pretending it's not there. The ways that we intellectualize the power we're afraid to sow and claim, the truths that were too strategic to speak, And the T-square says you can't have authentic Aquarian liberation freedom whilst performing Leo exceptionism. You can't be the cool revolutionary for clout. You can't be the smartest person in the room who's above it all while secretly needing everyone to notice. So either you're in it for real or you're cosplaying rebellion for an audience. So think about, Succession, the show. I don't know if you've watched it, but the Roy family performing care and loyalty while systematically destroying each other for the father's approval. They're brilliant at looking like they care about the collective whilst only caring about being chosen to, be the next in succession, right? And that's the addiction of the South Node in Leo. The North Node in Aquarius is, F to vex about, our fathers or anyone else's approval. Build something that serves people instead of egos. So it's asking us to think about where are you performing revolution, change instead of living it. Collecting woke points for your brand instead of actually doing the work. Needing the group to acknowledge your uniqueness instead of genuinely contributing. Lilith in Scorpio doesn't let you bypass this spiritually. Lilith in Scorpio asks, where's your rage? What power have you abandoned to be likable? What truth are you sitting on because speaking it will cost your audience, And the second T-square, brings a spotlight on our career, values, health and integration. So with the midhaven in Scorpio opposite Mercury and Venus in Aquarius squaring Hygeia in Gemini, again, it brings our attention to how our public image and our career and the way that we communicate are at odds with our values, and the split is work requires Scorpio intensity, power dynamics, emotional depth, and behind the scenes maneuvering, But Mercury and Venus want Aquarian expression, clarity, innovation, newness, detachment, systematic thinking. Meanwhile, your body says, can we have variety and stimulation? Especially on the mental, intellectual level, right? And can we actually rest instead of constant intensity and doing, right? That leads to burnout. So the square forces integration, asking you, how do you build a career both authentic, which is represented by Scorpio, and intellectually, vigorous, sound, which is represented by Aquarius, and sustainable, which doesn't lead to burning out. You being asked and supported to stop compartmentalizing, putting things into boxes, repressing, hiding, because our work affects our values and our values can affect our work. Values can affect our health and health affects our ability for depth and work as well. It's all connected, and pretending it isn't is what makes us sick, right? So this retrograde is asking us, is your professional path sustainable in the long term? Are, your public facing values aligned with your private behaviour? And what daily practices will support the career and relationships you want in your life, right? And that you claim that you want, and as I said, it's asking us this retrograde in a nutshell to get real about who we say we are and who we actually are, right? So the Thor's hammer brings, crises that forges, rebuilds. And Thor's hammer, it's what a blacksmith, which is like a metal worker, welder sort of energy, right? So the South Node in Leo and Lilith in Scorpio, both quincunx, Chiron and Aries in Pisces, creates a narrow triangle. This is crisis energy focused like a hammer striking an anvil, which is a metal working tool. We're being forged, molded by this energy. Chiron in Pisces is our unhealable wounds around boundaries, spirituality, victimhood and dissolution, letting go. And Aries in Pisces is wanting us to nurture ourselves through letting go and reminds us of mothering that doesn't possess, and using our grief and our suffering as a fertilizer for newness, right? So the South Node Leo combo brings our attention to how we seek validation through being sort of like exceptional whilst hiding our rage and truth, right? And it brings an awkward adjusting energy that doesn't fit cleanly, right? The hammer strikes when patterns collide. You can't heal, Chiron. By performing spiritual progress, you actually have to live it and do the work, do the shadow work, right? You can't mother yourself, which is Keris energy, whilst running, and thinking things like I'm only valuable if I'm extraordinary and people like me, and you can't integrate Lilith's rage by hiding it for image, like I can't be my true self because if I am, people won't like me. And the crisis is the cure, the breakdown is the breakthrough, right? You're not being destroyed, you're being reforged, remolded, right? But it requires putting down a hammer yourself, stopping self-inflicted blows of perfectionism, procrastination, comparing yourself with others spiritually, bypassing anything else you do to not be your authentic self. And as I said, it can be hard because sometimes we do have to put on that professional front, but I believe in our private life, especially, and to an extent in our careers, we should be able to be our true selves, right? And we should be able to align our values with our career. But I know it's hard because money have to make, as they say in the Caribbean, and bills have to be paid, right? But ultimately, you need to know when to remove yourself from things and situations that are not for you, or you will melt into the slag instead of becoming a blade. So you will go into the conforming and not being your true self, right? Rather than becoming the blade, your authentic self, right? Your empowered self. So the stelliums between the Sun Palace and the North Node in Aquarius, and the Sun, North Node and Ascendant in Aquarius, pulls us towards the North Node destiny, wanting us to be change agents, truth tellers, inventors. It holds space for our collective growth and evolution, even when it's unpopular, right? It wants us to do things because it needs to be done, not because it brings us popularity. So Palace in Aquarius brings strategic intelligence, and it wants us to apply it to our social systems, and it allows us to see patterns in our cultural programming that others can miss. And the Sun in Aquarius is the core identity energy, claiming our outsider status as strength, giving us the strength to be who we truly are. And the North Node, Soul's GPS, is screaming this is the way towards authentic belonging with misfits and seers, those who, see forward, because that's what Aquarius energy is. It's thinking outside of the box, moving from the traditions that just repeat and have us thinking, why in 2026 are we living in such a divided world, right? With all this technological and medical and every other form of advancement, right? Why are we still behaving in this way? So Mercury Retrograde is asking us to review the path that we walk. Are we prepared to be genuinely inventive, and forward thinking, or are we just pretending to be forward thinking, to be contrarian, to go with the times just to get the likes and engagement? It wants us to build authentic community and not just collect followers, right? It wants us to speak our truth and not perform wokeness for social capital, but actually be awakened, right? And it reminds us that we are always awakening. We are never awake or woke. We should be awakening, always upgrading, right? And this retrograde doesn't want us to dismantle what's real, you know. It's here to compost what was always, you know, reduce and kill what was always a performance. And if your Aquarius path is authentic, truly about your own individual and collective liberation, freedom, and genuine innovation, uncomfortable truths will be revealed, right? But, you know, although that's going to happen, the truth's going to be out, right? This retrograde strengthens us, you know, by burning away ego attachments. But if you have been using Aquarian ideals to avoid intimacy, feel better than others and superior, and bypass true healing and other work, this retrograde exposes that it's not punishment, it's mercy, right? It's showing us truth so we can heal and move on from it and do the shadow work and inner work, right? Because it's better to know now than waste another decade or year or even a month building on a false foundation. You know, it's better to know the truth than to continue with our toxic relationships or toxic habits, right? So the shadow work, what Lilith in Scorpio demands, because, you know, Lilith in Scorpio doesn't do subtle. She's the suppressed feminine emotional energy and raise the power you were punished for, claiming the sexuality that made people uncomfortable or the self-expression that made people uncomfortable when you was a child or earlier on in your life, the truth you weren't allowed to speak. And in Scorpio, she's at home, depth, darkness, transformation, a taboo, and she's square the entire Aquarius lineup, which means your intellectual detachment and, you know, the we are all equal ideals are being confronted by the reality of power, desire, and difference in real life, right? So the questions Lilith asks us to ask, right, is where have you been too nice? Where have you intellectualized your anger to make it more palatable, acceptable to others? Where have you performed I'm not like other girls or people, or I'm too evolved beyond, you know, petty jealousy, I don't have that jealousy, whilst actually seething underneath and being jealous, you know? Where have you abandoned your erotic power to be seen as intellectual? Where have you given away your voice to keep the peace? Where have you made yourself smaller so someone else can feel bigger? And the square to the sun ascendant in Aquarius is sharp. You're being asked to integrate Lilith phrase without losing the Aquarian ideals, but also without losing those ideals to bypass the messy, irrational, embodied reality of being human. So you don't transcend shadow, you know, go beyond your shadow by floating above it. You transcend your shadow by accepting it, working with it, integrating it, you know, by going through it. So I don't know if you've seen the TV show Fleabag, right? So think Fleabag breaking the fourth wall. She's been performing self-awareness this whole time, using it as a shield against intimacy. She can't narrate dysfunction, intellectualize her patterns, make herself the punchline, right? But when the priest, sorry, spoiler alert if you don't watch these shows, but yeah, but when the priest sees her doing it, when he catches her breaking the fourth wall and asks, where do you just go? That's the moment the performance cracks. This is, you know, what this retrograde with the Lilith square, the Aquarius planets and Mercury in Aquarius, late Aquarius, right, the Antarctic degree, is reminding us maybe you've been so good at self-awareness, at analysing patterns, at being the most emotionally intelligent person in the room, but have you been using that self-awareness to actually change or as a shield against vulnerability? Lilith doesn't want your analysis of rage, she wants you to feel it, speak it, act on it, use it as motivation for necessary disruption, you know, instead of turning it inward or performing it as transcendence, right? So the practical shadow work that this transit wants us to do, you know, because it offers us the perfect space for, you know, Lilith and aggressive and any other thing that would bypass suffering, integration, right? So it wants us to review the moments that you've swallowed your truth, not in a let me analyse way, but in a way that says let me feel the full force of what I didn't say way. Write it all down, voice record it, all of it. The things you were too polite to speak, too strategic to risk, too afraid of consequences to voice. Notice the relationships where you've gave your power away. Who have you made yourself smaller for? Whose ego have you managed? Whose feelings have you prioritized over your own boundaries? Where have you performed compliance to avoid conflict? This isn't about blame. Others may not have asked you to do this. You may have naturally just have done it voluntarily, thinking it was love or compromise or maturity. But if it cost you your own voice, your own power, your own authentic expression, Lilith wants it back. Lilith wants you to reclaim, right? Feel the rage you've been intellectualizing, about. You can explain why you're angry, you can speak your mind, you can contextualize your anger or anything else, you can, theorize it, talk about it, for a while. That's brilliant. Now, as well as doing that, once you contextualize it, right, and theorize it, can you actually let yourself be furious without immediately turning it into a dissertation? Rage isn't the problem. Suppressed rage that turns into depression, passive aggression, or performing enlightenment, that's the problem. Lilith wants you to know what you're angry about and what you want to do with that information. Reclaiming your erotic power, not necessarily sexual, though maybe, erotic in the Audrey Lorde sense, and rest in peace and all of that, the life force, the creative power, the yes that comes from your body, not your brain. And it asks you to ask, where have you shut this down to be taken seriously? Where have you performed this embodiment, numbing yourself to who you are, to seem spiritual or intellectual? Your body has intelligence that your mind can't access, right? Lilith square Aquarius says, stop trying to think your way into feeling. Let yourself want things. Let yourself be messy about it. Let yourself be irrational, alive and hungry, and it reminds us it's all about integration, not transcendence, going beyond. The goal isn't to become a Lilith rage monster who burns down everything. The goal is integration, bringing shadow material into consciousness and deciding consciously what to do with it. Maybe you speak the truth you've been sitting on and discover the relationship can handle it. Maybe you set the boundary you've been avoiding to find out who respects it. Maybe you claim the power you've been afraid of and release it, and realize it doesn't make you a monster to claim your power and express your power. It makes you more effective. Or maybe you speak the truth and the relationship ends. Maybe you set the boundary and people leave. Maybe you claim your power and use your audience. Lilith says, good, now you know who's actually in it with you versus who was just benefiting from your smallness, And by the time Mercury stations direct on the 20th of March, you will know what changes when you stop being nice and start being honest. You will understand which connections can handle your full power and which were always conditional on your performance, right? The retrograde gives you 3 weeks to feel what you've been intellectual about. Use them. Your rage isn't the enemy. Your politeness at the cost of truth, that's what's killing you. So now I'm going to go deeper into the symbolic layers of the Nakshatras and the Sabian symbols, right? So, as I said, we've got Mercury in the 29th degree of Aquarius, and this falls in the Bhadrapada Nakshatra, ruled by Jupiter. So this Nakshatra is symbolized by the front legs of a funeral car or a two-faced man or person, representing the duality between the material and the spiritual existence, right? Transition from life to death, or more accurately, from ego into transcendence. So Bhagapada is called the burning pair because it burns away impurities through crisis, not gentle purification but spiritual emergency. It's associated with unconventional wisdom, the ability to see both sides, and transformation, requiring you to let the fire, consume what's false, right? So with Mercury retrograde here, you're being purified intellectually and communicatively. What you thought was nuanced perspective might be fence sitting, right? What you thought was spiritual progress might be avoiding lived reality. What you thought was holding a paradox might be collapsing into relativism, where nothing matters because everything's equally valid. This Nakshatra asks, can you hold multiple truths without abandoning discernment, judgment, right? It's asking, can you honor different perspectives without abandoning your own knowing? Can you be flexible without becoming shapeless and just going with what everyone else says and thinks, right? So Jupiter ruling this Nakshatra means that, as we've seen, right, this retrograde has some kind of philosophical power and weight. This isn't just about mistexts, it's about reviewing your worldview, your belief system, your ethical framework, your understanding of truth itself. Are the things you believe what you actually believe, or what you've been told to believe, or the social media or the world tells you to believe, what do you actually think? Pada gives you the ability to transform through crisis, but only if you're willing to let the fire burn what needs burning instead of performing fireproofing with spiritual concepts. The two-faced man isn't about deception, it's about comprehensive vision, seeing the material and spiritual implications, meanings, understanding how healing on the individual level serves collective liberation, knowing that evolution requires both tearing down and building up. So Mercury, talking about the first Sabian symbol in more depth now, has the Sabian symbology of a butterfly emerging, coming out of the chrysalis, as we said, and it rules the sin bone in our human body. So it's reminding us, as I said, that you can't unbecome what you have become. The transformation is irreversible, and what remains is accepting you're not who you were, and the retrograde is the vulnerable period where your new wings dry before you can fly. Trying to climb back into the safety of your old self kills what you're have or are evolving into, or what you're meant to go into, because some of you may have been putting off the change because it means letting go of relationships, situations and stuff, hurting other people, not intentionally, but just by you changing, they'll be hurt, right? And butterflies that are helped out of the chrysalis by well-meaning humans die. They need the struggle to pump fluid into their wings and develop strength to fly. If you bypass the struggle, you stay wet, grounded and vulnerable. This symbol also shows visibility. Butterflies are seen, admired and photographed. Your transformation isn't private anymore. People have noticed you've changed, and not everybody likes it, as I said. Some will miss the caterpillar version of you that was easier to understand, less threatening, more contained, and this retrograde tests whether you can handle being seen in your becoming, or whether you'll perform metamorphosis, changing as performance art whilst hiding the wet, messy reality of actual change. The left tibia connection is brilliant. It's the larger bone in your lower leg, the one bearing weight when you stand and walk. Your transformation needs to be load bearing. You need to actually be going through it right, not performative, decorative. It's asking, can these new wings carry you, what you've been building, the habits, the day-to-day routines, all of that, or are there just pretty addictions to the same old caterpillar mindset, so it's reminding us that we need to go beyond, right? And Venus at the 26 degrees of Aquarius, the hydrometer, right, ruling our outer leg bone, and the hydrometer measures specific gravity, as I said, and purity of liquids. Essentially it tests concentration and quality. So in Venus, relationships, values, beauty, context, and all of that gets scrutinized, right? This symbol asks, what's the purity level of what you're calling love and friendship and values? What's the density of this concentration? Is it substantial or diluted, as I said before? Are you staying in something concentrated and nourishing, or pretending weak tea, as I said before, is espresso? The hydrometer doesn't judge, it measures objectively. You need that same objectivity about relationships and your desires, removing the story you've been telling yourself and looking at what's actually there. Are you staying, as I said before, because your relationships, your comfort zone is genuinely good, or because leaving these things would require admitting you were wrong? And I know it can be hard and you can feel silly, I've been there, and foolish for staying and believing in things that you come to not believe in, but ultimately we have to face that and forgive ourselves, because we were only acting on what we knew at the time, right? Allowing ourselves to move into the new. It also wants us to think about whatever it is you're pursuing and chasing. Is it because whatever, if it's a relationship or whatever, are you going after it because it resonates with you, or because the chase distracts you from your own inner and shadow work, right? Is the relationships you're involving yourself in feeding you, nurturing you, or are you so used to being hungry you've forgotten what nourishment feels like, right? And the right fibula parallels the left tibia. These bones work together for stability and movement. Your values and relationships need the same density and strength as your transformation. If your becoming is concentrated and real, but your relationships are diluted and performed, you will be unstable. Test the purity, measure the density, the authenticity of your relationships and everything else, know what you're actually working with so you can keep it or change it, right? And Juno at the 27th degree of Sagittarius, which has the Scorpio's vision taking form, ruling our glute muscles, which is our powerhouse muscles and supports everything, right? Our core and legs and all of that. So the sculpture doesn't hope the vision appears, they actively shape it, carve it, bring it into being, through sustained effort and skill. So it's drawing our attention to us being at this stage of our partnerships and commitments. The vision exists. Now you're in the messy middle of manifesting it, right? And this isn't about theory. We have to do the action to manifest our reality. It's not just about affirmations. So we're not just thinking about what partnerships could look like, we're actually building them with our actual choices, our daily behavior, thoughts, and all of that form who we become and what we do. Our willingness to chisel away and break away, let go of what doesn't serve the vision. And the glute muscles are the largest, strongest in our body. They power almost every major movement: standing, walking, running, climbing. Partnerships should strengthen your ability to move through the world, not diminish it, not weaken you, not destroy your ability to live and be in the world, right? So if your relationships require making yourself smaller, weaker, less capable of independent movement, that's not the sculpture's vision taking form. That's you carving, moulding yourself down to fit someone else's image of who you should be. Mercury Retrograde gives us all a chance to review the blueprint, as I said before. We carve it too far in the wrong direction that it'd be harder for us to change. And I believe change, we can always do it, but it's just harder sometimes as we get more and more in our comfort zone, and habits that can be hard to break, right? So it's given us the power to let go of the things we need to let go of. And Hygeia at the 1st degree of Gemini, the glass bottom boat drifting over undersea wonders. So the glass bottom allowing the people in the ship to see what's in the sea, because it's it's got glass as the bottom of the floor, so it's see-through, so we can observe the surface without getting wet. So Hygeia is the goddess of health and prevention, preventing things before it happens, allowing us to see the underwater patterns, hidden dynamics, things that would pull us under if we dove into the water unprepared, right? This is about seeing beneath the surface of our day-to-day health patterns, how stress manifests in our body, how unexpressed communication can restrict our breath, how information that we consume affects our nervous system, and the trachea is our passage for breath and voice, and when restricted literally or metaphorically, everything suffers. What aren't you saying that's choking you? What's your body trying to communicate that your mind keeps intellectualizing away? The glass bottom bolt souls observe without drowning. You don't need to dive into every pattern to understand it. Sometimes witnessing it is enough, right? So the midhaven at the 25th degree of Scorpio, which has the Sabian symbology of an X-ray, ruling the tailbone and fallopian tubes, right? So as I said, the X-ray can see through potential, right, and exposes what's hidden. So our public image and career carry this quality at times because we have to put on a mask, right? It allows us to see through the crap, as I said, as well. And Scorpio wants us to be more sort of like specific, and it's bringing that targeted intervention energy and forcing us to integrate what needs to be integrated, right? So it's asking us what outdated professional structures are we still carrying. As I said before, what ancestor patterns in our career lineage needs to be released. So it's asking us what, and supporting us in giving birth to new patterns and creative work, that's stuck in the scaffolding of how things should be done and allowing our creativity to flow. It's asking us to use our X-ray vision of ourselves, what's our professional skeleton, and revealing what's the underlying structure beneath our career performance. Is it solid, or is stress, and fractures holding everything together with willpower and caffeine, right? Asking us to remove what we need to, review what needs letting go so we can move forward, right, as Mercury goes direct. So now I'm just going to talk a bit more deeper about the timing and phases of the first retrograde journey of the year. So Mercury doesn't just flip a switch and go retrograde. It's a process with distinct phases, right? Each bringing different energy. So the pre-shadow period began on the 11th of February at the 15th degree, 14, 16 minute, 15 degrees Aquarius. It goes retrograde in the 29th degree, 28th, 20 minute. Then it goes direct again on the 20th of March, the same degree. It went into pre-shadow on the 11th of February at the 15th degree of Aquarius, and the post-shadow ends when it gets back to the 29th degree of Aquarius on the 9th of April. So ultimately it's 58 days, the whole period, from the 11th of February to the 9th of April, and the actual retrograde is from the 26th of February to the 20th of March, which is 23 days. So if you think of the pre-retrograde shadow period as a preview from the 11th of February to the 25th of February, Mercury moves forward through the 14th to 28 degrees of Aquarius, covering the ground it will later go over again and retrace. So pay attention during this period to what comes up, conversations feeling incomplete, technology issues that seem fixable but are not, friendship dynamics feeling off, or any other relationship dynamics feeling off. The retrograde shows us what we need to review, so pay attention, because for each and every single one of us, it's different things we need to review depending on how Mercury's interacting with your birth chart and the houses it's touching, right? So during this phase, you might notice yourself paying too much attention to your own goals whilst losing track of your support network. And remember, this is information, not failure. Awareness now gives you a head start. So, if you do get lost in this time, be gentle with yourself, apologise if need be, or for some of you it's necessary to focus on your own needs, right? So during the Stelliums retrograde shadow, which is the 26th of February to the 2nd of March, Mercury is barely moving. As I said, it's swinging side to side at the Arctic degree, the 29th degree, the last degree, well, the degree before the last degree of Aquarius, and it's broadcasting at maximum intensity. You know, the vibes is intense. Everything that's been building up can erupt. So sometimes when you choose, as I said earlier, to depend on friends, you find they're already depending on you, and everyone can get confusion. So it's drawing our attention to codependency. This week, you know, the 26th of Feb to the 2nd of March will clarify the confusion. Often abruptly, you discover who's actually available versus who's been performing availability and being your friends, or where you've been performing availability with your friends, are you and other people in your life in an equal relationship, or is it codependent, or is one of you taking more, or some of you taking more? Technology breakdowns can also hit hard during this week. Your phone, computer, car, anything with communication or movement ability can become temperamental. But these are not random glitzes. You know, for some of you, they're forcing you offline into being more present in your body, into noticing what you've been avoiding by staying digitally distracted, and you can just have like major realizations that can land like cold water. The friend whose behavior you've been excusing can look different and you can't unsee it. The group that felt like community reveals itself as a clique and not really community. But whatever you notice, don't make big decisions yet. Feel everything, write it down, sit with the discomfort. This phase is recognition, it's not about resolution, right? So Mercury in phase 3, the retrograde through period from the 3rd of March to the 19th of March, Mercury moves backward through the 28th degree of Aquarius, the 29th degree, right, reviewing everything from the pre-shadow and Stelliums period. So this is the sorting out phase, right? So some questions you can ask yourself is, where did you prioritize image over intimacy, goals over genuine connection, performance over presence? This isn't about guilt, it's about gathering information so goals can find better focus. Relationship patterns can surface, come up within the new contents. Conversations from weeks ago can replay in your mind, and suddenly you see what was actually being said underneath the words, So the key date is the 13th of March, when Mercury retrograde makes its exact conjunction to Venus again. So relationship truths, the deep truths can come to your attention. What needs to change, and whether everyone involved is willing to change it or not. The truth shall come out, so to speak. And then we've got the direct period from the 20th of March to the 22nd of March. So when Mercury goes direct in the 14th degree of Aquarius, this is the integration point, right? We can have realizations, and these can start turning into decisions. Maybe you spent weeks pinning down who your real friends are. You've been separating the wheat from the chaff, who's really in the game. Now it's the time to nail down these connections and get the message through to the ones who matter. You may have the urge to immediately implement every realization, and this can be strong, but hold it steady, because Mercury isn't fully direct yet. It's turning around, getting its bearings. Give it and yourself a few days to reconnect and refocus yourself before making big moves and decisions. And during the post shadow phase from the 23rd of March to the 9th of April, start implementing as Mercury goes forward through the 14th to the 28th degree of Aquarius for the 3rd time, retracing the retrograde path. Maybe you've had some realizations, you've done the review work, you separated real from performance, the fake from the real ones, and all of that. Now you actually get to change your behavior, relationships, communication patterns based on what you've learned. This is where the work either sticks or it doesn't. If you had breakthrough insights during the retrograde, but return to the same patterns. Once it's over, you've wasted the opportunity. The test isn't what you realise, it's what you do with it, you know, because as I say a lot, us humans can know the truth, but we like our comfort zone, so we live a lie, right, because the truth can be hard to face and follow through. Once we acknowledge the truth, we have to act on it, right? So by the 9th of April, when Mercury finally clears the shadow zone, friendships can be clarified. You can have more clarity about who's your actual support network as you confront your support network dynamics. Relationships with technology reset, you know, and your goals can become more aligned with your genuine support structure and routine, and truths can be spoken. Relationships that were hovering, you know, just staring your life, not really giving, draining your energy, you know, have either been, you know, reset, you know, boundaries reset or released. So, you know, the butterfly has dried its wings and now it's time to fly, right? Now I'm going to talk about what not to do during the retrograde. So, you know, number one, don't go back to an ex who hasn't changed. And, you know, maybe you haven't changed either, because the classic Mercury retrograde scenario is someone from the past reappears and suddenly all the reasons you left, you know, feel negotiable. But the hydrometer, remember, test still applies. What's the actual purity and density of the relationship, you know? Remove the comfort zone and nostalgia over, you know, the past experiences, the loneliness, that maybe this time it will work, you know, and think about what's actually there. If the core dynamic that didn't work before hasn't changed, you're not rekindling, you're climbing back into the chrysalis that no longer fits, remember? And the butterfly wants it out of the chrysalis, can't go back, and the Sabian symbol says no, don't do that, right? Don't use spiritual concepts or any other concepts over analysing and all of that to bypass feelings that need to be felt. The Pavava, Bhadrapada influence loves spiritual processes, but it also burns away spiritual bypassing, saying everything happens for a reason and things like that, or I'm choosing to see this as a lesson, can be genuine wisdom, or, you know, it can be a way to intellectualize the pain instead of feeling it. So in the book, you know, the body keeps the score. The author says that trauma isn't healed by understanding it, it's healed by completing the body's response to it. So your nervous system doesn't care about your spiritual reframe and, you know, reset and bypassing. It needs to actually feel the grief, the fear you've been, you know, trying to transcend and go beyond, before you can actually go beyond it, you know. So the retrograde in the Pava, Bhadrapada, Nakshatra asks, are you transforming through crisis or using spirituality to perform immunity to crisis while your body holds the score? Don't gaslight yourself that your gut instinct is anxiety when it's actually a warning. So, you know, Aquarius, where this retrograde is, right, love subjectivity, data, rational analysis, but sometimes your body knows before your brain can explain, right? So if every cell is screaming this isn't right, but you can't logically justify why, don't override the signal. Mercury square to Hygiene, the mind-body health connection is separating. So you have just been shown how your thoughts affect your body. Listen to the feedback. Your anxiety may be your nervous system actually perceiving danger that your mind wants to rationalize away, you know. So don't stay in situations because leaving would require admitting that you were wrong, you know, as this kills more dreams than the failure itself. You know, you invested time, energy, money, identity into this path, relationship, career. So leaving means admitting that the investment didn't pay off, so you stay, doubling down, hoping more investment will bring more returns. But the hydrometer measures what's actually there, not what you wish was there. If the concentration is weak and getting weaker, adding more of yourself doesn't strengthen it, it just dilutes it further. Don't silence yourself to keep the peace when your truth would create a necessary rupture, you know. And Lilith in Scorpio square your Aquarius placement demands this. Where are you being too nice? Where are you managing someone else's ego instead of speaking your reality? Where are you performing calm whilst raging inside? Keeping the peace isn't the same as creating peace. Sometimes the rupture is the healing. The infection needs to, surface, come up before it can be treated, right? So what to do? So have the uncomfortable conversations that you've been putting off, right? The saying like things like the timing isn't right is often the code for I'm scared, because as I said earlier, when we know the truth, it means sometimes, well, most of the times we have to act on it or continue to live a lie. It's fair enough if you're scared. These conversations, facing the truth, getting outside of your comfort zone, change is terrifying. But Mercury retrograde in Aquarius, the sign of truth telling, while squaring your midhaven, public facing, pressure building, is as close to cosmic permission as you'll get. Talk to your person about the relationship purity test results. Talk to your boss about unsustainable power dynamics. Talk to your friend about the one-sided support pattern, Talk to yourself about what you're pretending not to know, or where you are taking too much from others and being the draining one. Right? This retrograde gives you 3 weeks from Mercury. Made me say it is culturally acceptable, use it. Also write down or voice note what you're pretending not to know, then read it or listen to it aloud to yourself. There's something for a lot of you that you're not admitting that sometimes obvious that you're working, it's obvious that you're working very hard to not see things. As I said, we can just pretend sometimes. I used to be very good at this, so avoiding the truth. So write it down, all of it. The thing you tell yourself that isn't bad, the thing you think you're being dramatic about, the thing that if you admitted it would require changing your entire life. So write it, then read it aloud. Hearing your own voice speak your own truth does something writing alone doesn't. It makes it real in a way that thoughts and even written words don't quite manage. So also notice which relationships strain you after every interaction, then consider what that information is telling you. Energy is data. If you feel exhausted, anxious or smaller after spending time with someone, even if they didn't do anything overtly wrong, that's information. Not everyone who drains you is toxic. Sometimes you're just not compatible, Sometimes the relationship needs, requires you to perform a version of yourself that costs too much energy to maintain. Sometimes they're lovely people who are just not your people, and vice versa, So the retrograde asks, are you willing to honour what your nervous system is telling you, even if you can't explain it rationally? Also, as I said, test the purity of your motivations. Ask yourself, am I doing this because it's right, or because I want to be seen doing it on social media for the likes, So the South Node in Leo and the North Node Aquarius demands this question. Are you posting about social justice because you're genuinely committed to collective liberation, freedom, or because you want to be seen as one of the good ones? Are you having this difficult conversation because it needs to happen, or because you want credit for being brave? Neither answer is inherently wrong. Ego isn't evil, but knowing the difference between genuine contribution and teamwork, and performance for approval helps you understand what your actual motivations are. So practice saying, I changed my mind without saying. Growth requires course direction. You're allowed to think something was right 2 years ago, even 2 minutes ago, and recognize it's wrong now. You're allowed to commit to a path and then change when new information arrives, The butterfly doesn't apologize for outgrowing the cocoon, neither should you. So separate the good from the bad, the wheat from the chaff, as we say in the UK. So by the 20th of March, when Mercury stations direct, you should know who your real friends are. The ones who've been hovering can now land or leave. Make a literal list if this helps, Column A, people who show up mutually. Column B, people you're constantly managing. Column C, people who drain more than they give. Column D, people who've been in the wings but might be reliable if given the chance. Now nail down column A and D connections. Let column B and C gently fade or directly confront what needs confronting, and by the 9th of April, when the shadow clears, your support network should reflect reality, not hope, right? Okay, so now I'm going to talk about the collective impact, what this means for all of us. So, as I said, Mercury retrograde in Aquarius, astrology transits in general, not just personal, they always have a collective impact. So, a Mercury in Aquarius rules groups, communities and social movements, technological systems, humanity's vision for its future, and this retrograde reviews all of that as well. So in terms of the technology, the true cost of technology on humanity, because we have to have bigger servers and that uses up a lot of electricity, and in terms of the individual collective, social media algorithms show you exactly why you're addicted to outrage instead of information. Online communities reveal their toxic disguise as activism. Technology outages, we're having quite a lot when TikTok, Twitter, LinkedIn, whatever, WhatsApp is down nowadays, and Cloudflare, which is the VPN that a lot of companies use, right, to deliver also websites and technological apps and that. And these remind us when tech outages happen, how dependent we are on systems that we don't control and barely understand. AI and automation reveal their limitations or their biases in ways that can't be ignored. The promise was connection and efficiency. The reality is often isolation because we don't communicate in person. And we can go up to whole meals and pay lots of money for meals and just be on our phones, right? Isolating ourselves behind screens and productivity metrics that measure everything except what matters, right? Ultimately, if you're a fan of Black Mirror like I am, this is proper Black Mirror territory, right? The episode where technology was supposed to bring us together, I think it's called Nosedive, and there's another one as well. But yeah, technology actually fragments us, disconnects us into individualized echo chambers, each person believing they're uniquely enlightened whilst following identical algorithms. We perform connection while losing the ability for actual real intimacy, and the retrograde asks us collectively, what's the actual cost of the tools we've built? What are we gaining and what are we losing? Can we reclaim the evolutionary potential of technology, or have we just created more sophisticated chains? So social movements can show us where they're eating their own, and what I mean by this, because Aquarius loves ideological purity, which is brilliant for vision and terrible for implementation, actually living the thing. So what's for social movements and activists, communities factoring over who's pure enough, woke enough, committed enough, and as I said, we're never woke, we're always awakening, things are changing, new ideas, expressions of gender, humanity and all of that comes into play. So we always have to take in information. We should be learning something new every day, or at least once a week, So the North Node in Aquarius path is collective freedom, but when Leo South Node performance anxiety infects it, we get activism as personal branding, revolution as aesthetic, justice work as a way to prove you're one of the good ones. And this retrograde separates genuine, systematic change work, from performance, activism and politics and all of that. So if your revolutionary values cost you nothing, and require no actual risks, and mostly involve posting the right things. That's not revolution, if you're not living it in real life, that's branding. Real collective work is messy. It involves people you don't always like, working towards goals you don't fully agree on but recognise as necessary. It requires holding paradoxical, the two things or more than two things can be true at once, without collapsing into either or thinking. It demands showing up even when nobody's watching you to give you credit. So as I said, collectively, our friendship groups can call for realignment. The screenshot themes apply collectively. We've all been leaning on each other whilst confusing what mutual support is versus one-sided labour, work, friendship. So friendship circles can reset during this retrograde. As I said, some groups will discover they were only held together by said enemies or said complaints, and when that runs out, there's nothing to complain about, and there's nothing underneath, there's no true connection. Some will recognise they have been performing community, whilst others, individuals, will silently burn out holding it together. Some will finally admit the group has outgrown its original purpose and needs to be restructured or dissolved, finished, ended. Also, late stage capitalism can compost, so composting requires the right balance of green, nitrogen-rich active decomposition, and brown, carbon-rich manure, whatever, structural stability. And too much green and you get rot. Too much brown and nothing breaks down, right? So we're watching late-stage capitalism compost itself in real time, but we keep trying to keep it alive and saving it instead of letting, the necessary decomposition happen. We add more green, constant growth, innovation, disruption to a system that needs brown, stability, sustainability, and rest. And Mercury Retrograde in Aquarius accelerates the composting process. So financial systems can show instability, work structures can reveal unsustainability, the promise of meritocracy, the argument of, is society organised by people who get success or power because of their true talent and abilities, or people getting positions because of their family position and status, so is it inherited wealth and luck, or is it true talent where most people have got their positions in society? And they're just work hard and myth can decompose under the weight of evidence, because a lot of the time, a lot of people in top, they've got a team around them, and of course they can do a lot. And if you got someone taking care of the children and the housework and all of that, of course you can do more things. And that's not to say that everybody in the top, don't work hard and all the rest of it, but it's to say, we need to get real of, what success actually is, and whether those on top are actually there because of their talent, which is good, or just who they know and power and money, right, to buy their way into a career. And like I said, these things are not wrong per se. It's just wrong when you like to those who are on the bottom, we've all got 24 hours in a day, you should be doing more and pushing this, work harder, when fundamentally there's behind the scenes there's 20 people keeping your organisation, your day-to-day life going, doing the cooking, cleaning, looking after kids for you. So obviously people have to do those things for themselves, don't have after they've done that, don't have enough hours. So selling a dream that's not reality. So ask yourself, what wants to be fertilized by this decomposition, letting go in your personal life, and collectively we'll be asking what new systems are trying to come up from the composting of the old. And Aquarius knows collective ownership models, resource sharing, technology in service of community rather than for profit. Value-based exchange that doesn't require endless growth to survive is the way to go. But first the old has to finish breaking down, and we're in the messy middle now, aren't we? Where everything's not fully composted yet, but it's too far gone to save. And this retrograde asks, can you tolerate the smell of decomposition? Because manure, poo-poo, that smell the best, right? So can you tolerate the smell of this long enough for new growth to, emerge and come up? So, in terms of our hope versus the expectations collectively for this retrograde, right? Aquarius, rules the hopes for the future, but there's a crucial difference between hope and expectation. Hope says, I believe in a better world and it's possible and I will work towards it. Expectations say it should already be here and are angry that it's not here, So this retrograde clarifies which one you've been operating from. If your activism is motivated by hope, you can sustain it even though setbacks happen because the work itself is meaningful. If it's motivated by expectations, you burn out fast because reality keeps disappointing you. The same with friendships, communities, technology, systems. Hope allows for the messy reality of humans and life on earth, trying to do better while still being flawed. Expectations demand perfection and punish anything less. So by the 9th of April, when the shadow clears, we're collectively having a better sense of what's actually possible versus what we've been hoping would magically appear without the work, and maybe, just maybe, we'll be ready to do the actual work instead of performing revolutionary change, aesthetics and all of that whilst waiting for someone else to save us. We'll start saving ourselves one by one, those who are capable of doing so as a collective. So to integrate this energy, the butterfly's first flight, right? This retrograde gives us 3 weeks of review from the 26th of February to the 20th of March, but the real test comes after, when Mercury stations direct at the 14th degree of Aquarius. And because the post shadow lasts until the 9th of April, this month-long period is about starting, implementing practical day-to-day actions you can take, taking what you've learned and actually changing your behaviour, thoughts, relationships and communication patterns. Insights without action, as I said, is just entertainment. So what does integration actually look like? Well, you've had the realizations, you separated the wheat from the chaff, the good ideas from the bad, the good relationships from those that are draining and the draining thoughts and all of that. You have identified who your real friends are versus who just was hovering and draining you. You understand which connections are mutual versus one-sided performance. Now what do you do? So, integration means having the conversation you've rehearsed in your head during the retrograde, the one where you tell the person about the hydrometer test results, the one where you confirm the friendship, dynamic or relationship or whatever, routine, habit, whatever has been off for months, the one where you admit you've been performing a version of yourself that's too exhausting to maintain. Integration means leaving the situation you realise was toxic, even though leaving is scary. It's not working, you've known for a while. So this retrograde removed the plausible deniability. Now you either honour what you know or gaslight yourself back into the familiar lie. And integration means implementing the health practices that actually work instead of the ones that are good online. Hygeia in Gemini squared Mercury showed you how your thoughts affect your body. Your nervous system has been screaming information. You keep intellectualizing away. Now it's time to listen. Integration means letting friendships and the things that need to get out of your life fade naturally, right? Instead of forcing connection out of guilt. Not everyone who was in your life needs to stay there, Some relationships serve their purpose and now they're done. Holding on to them doesn't honour what they were, it just prevents new growth, right? So integration means choosing the harder path that's not actually yours instead of the easier path that's expected. And the North Node Aquarius pull is strong. Your soul wants collective contribution, wants to connect and contribute, uncomfortable truth, genuine belonging with the misfits, that's what he wants. He wants to find your people. But the South Node in Leo pattern is comfortable be special, get approved, perform excellence, perform being woke, you know. And the retrograde is showing you which one you've actually been following despite what you've claimed, you know. It will show you your truth if you work with this energy. So integration means speaking your truth even when your voice shakes, because silence is no longer an option. Lilith in Scorpio demands this. Where have you been too nice? Where have you given away your power to keep the peace? What changes when you stop being nice and start being honest? And the vulnerable period, you know, as I said, butterflies don't emerge and immediately fly. They're wet, fragile, pumping fluid into their wings. They need time for their wings to dry and strengthen before they can actually use them. And if you try to rush this process or reverse it, you kill the butterfly. So this is where you are at post-retrograde, right? You have transformed. The metamorphosis is complete, but your new form isn't flight ready yet. You're in the vulnerable waiting period, and this isn't failure, it's biology. You're going to feel exposed. People notice you have changed, and not everyone likes it. Some miss the caterpillar version. It was easier to understand, less threatening, more contained. Some are genuinely happy for your transformation, but don't know how to relate to this version of you yet. Some will actively try to convince you to climb back into the chrysalis because you're becoming threatens their status, right? So let them be comfortable. Your transformation isn't their responsibility to manage. So the flight period, you know, by the 9th of April, when Mercury leaves the shadow zone completely, you should be ready. Your wings have dried, your strength has returned, you have integrated the lessons instead of just entertaining the insights. You will know who your real friends are, the ones who can handle your full wingspan, who aren't threatened by your flight, who cheer when you catch the wind. You have to let go of connections that were hovering but never landing, the ones that wanted you small and grateful. You will have spoken the truths that needed speaking, even the ones that changed everything, right? You have set the boundaries that cost you relationships and discovered the cost was worth it because what remains is real, right? You will understand the difference between goals that actually serve your evolution versus goals you inherited or performed from the need for approval. You would have reset your goals with the genuine support structure you identified, not the imagined ones you wish existed, right? You will have separated your authentic values from your performed values. You know what you actually believe versus what you downloaded without examination. You will have tested the purity of your motivations and accepted what the Hydra meter revealed, you know. No apologies, because butterflies don't apologize for their transformation. They don't shrink their wings to make caterpillars comfortable. They don't perform being smaller than they are to fit back into the spaces they have outgrown, and neither should you. This retrograde asks, are you ready to use your new wings, or will you pretend you're still a caterpillar? And by April you would have your answer. It will be there, and if the answer is I'm ready to fly, then fly visibly in the daylight, predators and all. The world needs what you have become more than it needs what you were. Your transformation serves something bigger than your comfort or anyone else's approval. The collective needs people willing to actually change, not just people performing change while staying fundamentally the same. And Mercury retrograde at the 29th degree of Aquarius, the aeronautic degree, the point of no return, asks if you're willing to irreversible transform, to accept that you can't go back, to fly with wet wings in the vulnerable period between what you were and what you're becoming. So as I said, you've been in a catharsis, you're dissolved, refractured, emerged. The retrograde was the drying period, uncomfortable, exposed, testing whether you panic and try to reverse what can't be undone. Now you fly. No more rehearsing, no more performance, no more pretending. You're still capable of being who you used to be. The butterfly can't go back into the chrysalis, as I kept on saying a few times, and you wouldn't want it to, even if it could, because we love butterflies, right? And we like to see their wings. So yeah, so now I'm just going to talk about how this affects, all the different houses and the 12 rising signs as well. Well, sun, moon and rising signs. So you read, if you're Aries rising, you got your moon in Taurus, then you read Aries and Taurus, and your sun's in Cancer, you do that, right? So in terms of the houses, right, to know how this Mercury retrograde affects you specifically, look at the house which holds, if any, or the cusp, the 14th to the 29th degree of Aquarius in your natal chart. The house or the cusp tells you the area and the aspects, what aspects these degrees may be making. You may have Saturn in Aquarius at the 17th degree, making, quincunx to Venus or whatever, the other way round. Aspects in these degrees, tell you the how. Your free will determines what you do with it. So the first house, if it hits your first house, your identity, crisis and breakthrough, how you've sinned, personal brand change, revision, your body communicating what your mouth won't. If it hits your second house, your values and worth can have a reset. Money patterns can be revealed, looked into. Your self-worth can be questioned, what you're willing to exchange your life for, and your life force for, what are you prepared to keep or stop draining you. If it hits your third house, your communication style can get a change, your sibling, neighbour and tensions can happen, local community dynamics, mental health needs become unavoidable. The fourth house, family patterns exposed, home situation needs confronting, emotional foundations can be rebuilt, ancestry speaking up, and creative blocks can reveal purpose, romance needing honesty, child related communications, joy versus obligation needs to be clarified. In terms of the sixth house, your work environment and health protocols can need change. Your day-to-day routines and habits can go through a total routine change, being rebuilt. Service versus martyrdom. Are you giving because you want to, because you feel like you have to sacrifice yourself? Are you looking after yourself? Your body can refuse unsustainable schedules and demands right now. If it hits your seventh house, there can be like a make or break moment in your partnerships, one-on-one relationships, sort of like can undergo, decision making process. You can start to own your crap and the other person. Your projections that you project on others can be withdrawn. Seeing partners and people clearly for the first time or the last time. The eighth house, if it hits here, shared resources and intimacy can have its reckoning, has its judgment. Joint finances reviewed, sexual communication, psychological work can intensify. Our belief systems, if it hits your ninth house, can crumble and reform. Higher education and question. Travel plans can be disrupted. Legal matter problems, can come up and surface. If it hits your 10th house, it can be career judgment, reckoning, and your public reputation can come under the spotlight. Authority figures can reveal themselves to what they are. Success metrics concerned, what is success? Is your idea of success your own, or what you're told to believe what success is, right? If it hits your 11th house, your community belonging and future vision, friendships can gain clarity. Group dynamics can be exposed, for what they are, the draining really. Are you just trauma bonding, Technology addictions can be confronted. If it hits your 12th house, unconscious patterns and shadow work, hidden material can come up, spiritual bypassing can be exposed, and self-sabotage can be revealed, So, watch out for that. So now I'm just going to go into the sign deep dives, right? So each of these are for the sun, moon and rising sign. So Aries, this retrograde hits your 11th house, so your friendship, groups, future vision. So mutual support, confusion can happen in friendships. Maybe you've been paying attention to your goals while losing track of your support network. Now you discover who's who, right? What's real and what's not. So what comes up for you is, the friends that are genuine, supportive versus performative, group dynamics revealing who gives versus who just takes, social media relationships versus real connection, future vision that actually is yours versus what community expects. How to integrate this retrograde is, have the friendship conversation, leave groups that drain more than they give, reset how you use technology and, your digital validation relationship, align future goals with genuine support, and identify what genuine support is. So watch out for miscommunications in friendships and relationships that reveal deeper incompatibility, technology forcing you offline, group conflicts exposing who's reliable, and future plans changing as the support structure clarifies and shows you what's what, right? So Taurus, Sun, Moon and Rising. So for you, Mercury's in the 10th house when it's retrograde. So this is your career, reputation and your public life. Getting a full review. So who actually supports your career versus who just networks, right? What comes up during this time is, alignment. Is your career path in alignment with your actual values? Your public image versus your private reality. Authority figures can show you their true nature. Success, how you measure success. You can find out that aren't really yours. You've been living to standards that you were told success was and what it was not and all the rest of it, so clarifying what success means for you. Professional relationships can show their true character right now. So to integrate this retrograde, make the necessary career changes, have the conversations with boss and authority that you've been avoiding, align your public work with private values, redefine success on your own terms, watch out for career miscommunications that force clarity, professional technology failures that show you what needs to change, right? Authority figures disappointing you or surprising you, and your public reputation changing as you become more authentic. For Gemini, Sun, Moon and Rising, so this hits your 9th house, so your beliefs, your higher learning and travel. This is your planet retrograding in the house of what you believe and why, because Mercury rules Gemini and Virgo, right? So your spiritual systems or become under intense review alongside your beliefs, higher education and all of that. So you can ask yourself which beliefs are genuinely yours versus inherited, what you've been told to believe, what you're teaching, learning versus what you think you should know. Travel plans can get disrupted, but usually it's for a reason. You may meet someone, get new information. Legal matters can come up that require your attention. There can be a gap between what you say you believe and your lived reality, and you may look into changing that. And to integrate this energy, stop consuming information as avoidance, trust your own knowing even when you can't explain it, release beliefs that no longer serve evolution, choose education that genuinely interests you, watch out for educational spiritual institutions showing limitations, travel technology failures revealing better timing, belief systems crumbling necessarily, legal communications requiring attention. For Cancer, Sun, Moon and Rising, this hits your 8th house, so your deepest, most hidden house gets excavated, looked into, right? So shared resources, intimacy, psychological work, power dynamics all can come up. So joint financial arrangements showing inequality, intimacy versus amendment, codependency in close relationships can come to your attention or continue to stay in your attention. Power dynamics you've been avoiding can come up. So psychological patterns can run unconsciously. What needs to die so something new can be born is what you need to ask yourself. To integrate this energy, have the money conversation, confront power imbalance in closest relationships, Let yourself be actually vulnerable instead of strategically vulnerable. Release what's dead instead of, restructuring it. Watch out for joint financial miscommunications, forcing honesty, sexual communication requiring directness, psychological material that comes up that you can't intellectualize, inheritance or debt issues that demand your attention, right? So for Leo, this hits your 7th house. Your partnership, your marriages, your one-on-one intimate relationships get full retrograde treatment. Business partnerships as well, your closest connections, all up for review. So projection, where you've been running in partnerships away from problems and projecting the issue on others. Communication patterns revealing deeper issues. Support dynamics showing who's carrying the relationship and who's just taking. And you can just think about also whether partnerships enhances your life or takes away, diminishes your energy and all of that. So to integrate this retrograde, have the partnership and other conversations about what's not working, own what you've been projecting onto others, renegotiate contracts not serving both partners, choose partners who can handle your full light or your needs, and you can meet theirs. Watch out for partnership miscommunications. These reveal deeper incompatibility. Contracts showing flaws at partners reappearing. Tests vigorously, whether you need to go back into old partnerships, whether it be business or intimate ones. If this happens for you, you can also see your reflection in your partner's behaviour and not like it as well. So watch out for that. For Virgo, this hits your 6th house, so your daily routine, your work and your health. This is your planet in your house, again. Double Virgo impact, daily routines, your work environment, health practices, service versus martyrdom, where you sacrifice yourself for meeting others' needs, neglecting your needs, all come under intense review. So watch out for what your body needs, because what your body needs to override your obsession and productivity needs right now. And this can be in your day-to-day life and your career, or in how you help others, look after your own health, and don't how you focus on productivity as well. As I said, comes under the spotlight. You may look at how sustainable your work environment is. Does it drive you to burnout? Looking at how you serve others versus how you neglect your own needs. You will think about changing how you look after your health, and how performance versus genuinely nurturing yourself, how you do that, rethinking how you take care of your health, as I said. So to integrate this, change unsustainable daily routines, confront work environment issues instead of coping, listen to body signals instead of overriding them, practice actual self-care, not performative wellness. Watch out for body breaking down, forcing rest, work technology failures, highlighting necessary changes, communication with your co-workers that can reveal who holds the load, and who carries it, and health information that contradicts what you thought worked for you, so this can be a complete restructuring of your day-to-day habits, right, Virgo? So for Libra, this hits your 5th house, so creativity, pleasure, romance, joy, gets reviewed. You'll be asking yourself things like what actually brings you joy versus what you perform for approval. Whether you're creating what you want or creating doing what gets validation. You can look into your romance, authenticity versus performance. Creative blocks can be revealed, and you can see the true purpose of these creative blocks. is someone draining your energy, so you can't be creative and all of that. Your relationship with risk and spontaneity can come under the spotlight. You're taking too much risk or not enough risk, are you being spontaneous or not? To integrate this energy, create for yourself, not for audience approval. Choose romance that challenges your balance seeking, so be spontaneous, take a risk, go out of the box. If you're in a relationship, do a different date night. If you're single, go on a safe date. I don't want you to just throw yourself into any relationship and then something happens. I listen to a lot of true crime, so do it in a safe way. Express yourself authentically instead of in a way that people can take, watering yourself down, dimming your light. But of course, respect other people's boundaries while doing that. Take risks that genuinely excite you, but watch out for creative projects, kind of stalling to reveal what's not yours. So there may be delays in creative and other projects, so pay attention to that, because you may think, oh no, I want them to go ahead, but maybe the pause is for you to reflect on whether you're doing the right thing right in your creativity. And watch out for romantic communications that can force honesty about the connection quality right, and do activities that bring you joy, and think about, these joy activities, these creative activities actually bringing you happiness, or are you doing it out of responsibility and obligation? This is how it's done, so this is how I need to do it, sort of going on, right? So check that out, or look into that. Libra. So Scorpio, Sun, Moon and Rising, your home, family, emotional foundation, because this retrograde hits your 4th house, so the most private house gets the retrograde treatment for you, your emotional side, family patterns, all of that. What family patterns have you been repeating unconsciously will be brought to your attention, what home actually means to you versus what you were taught. Your emotional foundation may need rebuilding, and generational and ancestral dysfunction material can come up for release, because after all, it's your home, family and emotional foundation that's going to be at the forefront of this retrograde for you, Scorpio. So to integrate this, confront the family conversation you've been avoiding. Make your home feel actually yours instead of performing space, fill the foundation crack so you can rebuild honestly. Release generational patterns that are not yours, right? Watch out for family miscommunications, bringing up old wounds, home technology failures that force you into a space, where you have to look at things differently, emotional, material wounds, psychological, spiritual trauma coming up, that's been buried, for you to look at and to get to the root at. And, your ancestry can speak through, thought and other behaviour patterns. You may just reflect on, family secrets and things that have repeated in your family for generations. For Sagittarius, this hits your 3rd house, so your communication, immediate environment, mental health, sibling, neighbours are all being revised. So what comes up for you is that your communication style, you can think, is it serving you versus is it keeping you safe but small? Your sibling, neighbour relationships revealing themselves in more detail. You may reflect on them, are they good? Do you need to distance? Do you need to get closer to your neighbours and siblings? Local community connections showing their true nature. Mental health needs can become unavoidable, to integrate this energy, speak what you mean instead of what sounds good. Write or voice record your truth instead of a markable version, public version, being politician, speak truth instead of beating around the bush, basically. And confront sibling neighbour issues directly. Prioritise mental health instead of performing stability. Watch out for miscommunications with sibling neighbours, forcing honesty. Look out for local technological failures that keep you present. Mental health patterns demanding attention and all of that, right? For Capricorn, Sun, Moon and Rising, Mercury retrogrades in your 2nd house, right? So this is your money, values, self-worth, all of that that gets reviewed, you know, what you earn, what you value, what you think you're worth, all comes under scrutiny, you know, comes under the spotlight to be reviewed. And so whether you're earning or spending in alignment with your actual values, you'll question that. Is your self-worth beyond your productivity? You know, do you just love yourself for who you are rather than what you do? Money as security, you know, do you use it as a measure of your worth, or is it just a security so you can buy things? You know, you think about what you value when nobody's watching. To integrate this energy, ask for what you're worth instead of what you think you can get. Spend on what you genuinely brings you value, you know, within your budget, but, you know, spend on things that you want rather than spending on things that you are told to buy. Trust your body's signals. Value yourself when you're not producing. Watch out for money miscommunication, revealing different values, financial technology issues forcing manual attention, self-worth crises triggered by productivity disruption, your body demanding attention that you've denied, right? For Aquarius, Sun, Moon and Rising, this Mercury Retrograde hits your first house, right? So this is your house of identity, body, personal expression. This is happening to you as Mercury Retrograde in your first house means you're the butterfly emerging from the chrysalis, right? So what comes up for you can be, you know, you asking who are you versus who you perform you are, you know, and this is being exposed with nowhere to hide. Body changes that people notice, maybe you change your appearance, you know, you look more tired or whatever. You can go through identity crises, breakthroughs or breakups, you know. The gap between how you see yourself and how others see you can become wider or close in. To integrate this energy, present your authentic self instead of, you know, strategically presenting yourself. Let your body express what your mind has been pleasing. And I know in work environments we can't always be our full self because you get fired and sacked, you know, so I know this has to be in a boundaried way as well, but in your private life, you know, let your body express what your mind has been pleasing. Be seen in your becoming, wet wings and all, you know, flaws and all, warts and all. Start performing cool detachment when you feel deeply. Watch out for people treating you differently because they sense you've changed. Your physical appearance can change, as I said, because you may just think, this ain't my look, I don't want to follow the fashion or the trends anymore, you know, you don't want to, you know, continue an image that you didn't consciously choose, you know. And the identity crisis in whatever form, although it can be scary for you right now, is actually the breakthrough, you know. So for Pisces, Sun, Moon and Rising, this hits your 12th house. So the most hidden house gets, you know, dug up and excavated for you. So it's deep unconscious work. Everything you have been running from or avoiding or spiritually bypassing can all come up, you know. Hidden material, the house of spirituality, addictions, the unconscious, as I said. So unconscious patterns you didn't know were running can show themselves. Isolation as healing versus avoidance can come up. Spiritual bypassing mechanisms, self-sabotage patterns, dreams and intuition, speaking more loudly, what you're pretending not to know and all of that. Integration, how to integrate this is actually do the shadow and inner work instead of reading about it. Feel the feelings you've been spiritualizing away. Use isolation consciously instead of reactively, you know, sorting yourself out as a reaction. Use it as a conscious way to get to know yourself and heal yourself on a deeper level. Listen to dreams and intuition instead of overriding with logic. Watch out for dreams bringing up uncomfortable material. Spiritual practices revealing themselves as bypassing self-sabotage patterns that come up. Alone time revealing what you've been avoiding, you know, Pisces. So for all signs, you know, this can be a time of judgment. And then we've got the solar lunar eclipses in Aquarius bringing that judgment. So we've got a lot of Aquarius energy getting us to face the truth about ourselves and society, right? As I said, the butterfly can't go back into the chrysalis, right? You've already changed, you know. the transformation is complete, what remains is the vulnerable waiting period where your wings dry before you can actually fly. And Mercury retrograde doesn't correct the change, it reveals it. It forces you to stop performing the old identity and start living the new one. It brings clarity to who your real friends are. It exposes the gaps between your revolutionary ideals and your actual behaviour. It burns away your impurity through the Parva, but the Pada, that sacrofuneral pyre cot burial, and yeah, it's uncomfortable because death, transformation always is. We don't like talking about letting go, endings and death in society, right? But remember, you're not just being buried, you're being reorganised. And by the 9th of April, when Mercury clears the retrograde shadow zone, you would have, or you should have, separated or making plans to separate real friends from performative ones, confronted the support dynamics causing confusion, re-collaborating, resetting your relationship with technology, aligning your goals with genuine support structures, speaking truths about life and whatever needs speaking, and release connections and relationships that were hovering, draining but never landing. And the work isn't transcending this retrograde, the work is integrating what it showed you, changing your behaviour based on what you learned, having the conversation you rehearsed in your head, leaving a situation where you realise it was toxic, choosing the harder path that actually is yours, the path of being yourself and speaking your truth even when your voice shakes. So remember, the butterfly has emerged, your transformation is complete. The only question is, will you use your new wings or will you keep pretending you're still the caterpillar? So yeah, thanks for listening to this very in-depth analysis of Mercury retrograde, right, on the 26th of February right up until the 20th of March when it goes direct, and the 9th of April when it leaves the shadow period, right? So I'm Imani, your holistic astrological karmic life coach, and it's been my pleasure. Take care.